Right. So would like to touch on the Chimurenga, the second Chimurenga. I think Tichango Iroi Sega one. It is both a history and a heritage studies lesson, but it's also very important for our to know our national history. Yes, it was the second Chimurenga was a pivotal act in the history of this country. It is the one which finally brought the independence. Remember, we lost in the first Chimurenga and we learned from our mistakes. But in second Chimurenga, we came back in full force and revenged. So there are keywords that you have to understand. And they might be asked in my paper one. This one. Kuti ainzi chimbuido chi, mujiba chi, you know. So chimbuidos were the female war collaborators. Remember, the war itself was dominantly a rural-based one. When I say rural-based one, yanyanyorukirwa kuma rurals, because ndo kumwe kuri bush, ndo kunonetsa kuexecute not the guerrilla type of warfare. A guerrilla type of warfare is the bush war. They usually call it the Rhodesian bush war. That's what they called it. And the whites really struggled. They struggled because of that. The whites had an advantage kuno kuma towns. Kuma towns undo yaitika but angangoroma acts of sabotage 1 or 2, like pakambopiswa kunonzi ku BP shell kwavaitora petrol kwavaitora fuel kwakambopiswa. Ndembonzwa nyaya yacho iro takomona wacho vanga utombori mbari munomhere vakahaya mataxi here vakazodai hamino nyaya dzaitaurwa. It's quite interesting. Ainzi ma acts of sabotage. Mudhara wangu waitombondiudza vati hanzi musi wacho here kwakaputika here takatomuka makuseni kwakaramba kuchiputitika utsi. Vanhu isi vakaungana nechepapa paflyover apo vachiona kwakaita mudenga makaita black. So hanzi like it was before independence. So hanzi tatakatomira nemawhites ipapa hanzi hey, the whites matarisiro anga akatiita hanzi waitoona kuti ziso iri it is full of hate. So the Chimbuidos were the female war collaborators, then the Mujibas, the male collaborators. Then the guerrillas were the freedom fighters, right? Because it's also our syllabus here is advising us to look into outlining the causes of the second Chimurenga. I'll explain that in detail. Describe the role played by the masses, the freedom fighters, and the spirit mediums, right? Yes. And describe the role played by national heroes and heroines, analyze the results of the second Chimurenga. So I'll try to do it all. It's quite simple. So let us, so the guerrillas were the freedom fighters too. What else? Then the sellouts. Pane vananyati vanza vananyati hanzi nanani vaitengesa base, sell out, traders, people who betray a cause. Ndaita vananyati ndikutedzera kamudhara kayake kusayo chakamufundisa kanonzani pane statement rakanotaura rananyati yanzi vakatengesa base repachimuri, right? So aedzobuditsa nyaya yevanhu vaitengesa. Pane vamwe vanhu vaiudza varungu vanga vaine dzinyu vanga variko vanhu vakadaro, but waiti ukabatwa. I've heard about those people being tortured. Taimbotaura nemaovheti kwamutare kwandakakurirawo taitengesa struggle kurovesa vamwe like aiudza information kuti vamwe vedu vakahwanda pakati. So iwo ukabatwa hanzi waigona kusungirirwa mbira dzakondo, so wotanga kudonhedzwa plastic riyono ari hupfuti moto chidona pamoto, so usinopfeka papoti. Right, so what were the causes of the second Chimurenga? And they are plenty. Ndomboona pangu pa ZBC pane yaiti Chimurenga files dzinondinakidza nyaya idzo dzisingaiti. So what were the causes of the second Chimurenga? Loss of land. Nyaya land is that's why you find out that land is the topical, the number 1 point, right? You find out that even after the Anglo-Ndebele War and the second Chimurenga, they took away the best land. In fact, after the Anglo-Ndebele War, they even relegated the Ndebele to the Gwai and Shangani reserves. Kusvika pakuti kumusha kwakapedzisira kwakunzi kuma-reserve kuita kushoresa kuti inzvimbo dzisingaibvi kana kuita sei. So there was loss of land, and whenever you lose land, like all the causes are linked to the loss of land. Because when you lose land, it means you have lost your minerals too. You have also lost your cattle. The land is the power. Our land, our sovereignty. So there is also the lack of freedom too. The lack of freedom and independence. Then there was the imposition of taxation too. Like the results of the first Chimurenga are also the causes of the years. Because then they began to introduce mimwe mitemo iya yekuti vanhu vatema vasatore land yacho, like vana Land Husbandry Act, vana Morris Carter Commission, vana Land Apportionment Act. Land Apportionment Act ndeyekuti ivo vaizvitorera zvimedu zveland zvakanaka zvezve, then imwe yakatonzi it is going to lie idle, right? Then there was also forced labor in the mines and the farms, and racial segregation. So racial segregation is an umbrella term in this regard, because it also it manifested in the issues like accommodation, like education, like transport. Because nguwa ya independence kuma 90s, I think you have seen it. They had houses for the poor and houses for the rich. And ukatasa kuno kundoko wakabva waisa ma-industries. Then vakomberedza ma-industries nema-location. Which means kana uri high fields, waigona kufamba netsoka unopinda muWillow. Which means kana waigara muBare, waigona kufamba netsoka kupinda muGranite side. Which means kana waigara kana kuSouthampton, waigona kufamba netsoka. In fact, unoona Southampton kwakutone dzimba dzavo. Southampton iri kaulow kaumiddle but ma high densities mazhinji. So they segregated the people to an extent that they even built some social facilities for the poor people. Like they ensure that mune grounds enyu ebhora, mune zvikoro zvenyu, mune clinic enyu, level renyu koko. Then was it isusu ya north of the Samora. Vaugara machi Madeodeo, Borodeo, Greendale. So that's where the segregation was. All the best things, all the number one things, all the special things were only for the whites. That's why we only roamed about in the CBD. No, we can't call it the CBD. The Central Business District is like Mkatikati town. It's also going to know downtown. Wanana rizende wanana. Tato ni freedom kaya kugochera chibagi muna fest. Nekutengesa nyinyi netsupu. Todzitu hubva kwedu kwa mtaro. You know, like that's how they segregated us. So even if you to look into education, when they built their high density suburbs for us, location yedu, they even built the schools thereof. George Stark, Mbare High, Glenview, Ameno, you know. Then they had their own Roosevelts, they had their own Churchill, they had their own Alan Wilson. They were only for the white elites. So there was there was segregation in terms of education, there was segregation in terms of the health provisions, there was segregation in terms of accommodation. So there was inequality in terms of everything. That's why we had to take up arms and fight for freedom and equality. So we want to look at the roles played by spirit mediums and chiefs in the second Chimurenga. We actually won the war because of what they did. They planned and organized the uprising. That's why we find out that up to now the government respects the traditional chiefs because of this history. This was a dominantly rural struggle. So when we were forefront my chiefs. So up to now the government respects chiefs. Because of that history, they played a pivotal role in terms of bringing about the independence of this country. So they prophesied on the war and assured Africans that they would win the war. They encouraged people to fight. They advised on strategies to be used. They communicated with ancestral spirits. They even commanded the soldiers, yes, because you cannot separate African traditional religion and the chiefdom systems. My chiefs say Amtons, they are inspired by what? There's something like that. So they relayed information from God and ancestors to chiefs and to people, and they provided medical herbs. They led at war discussions and presided over war crimes. They coordinated the war. They mobilized the people and taught people political education. Kudzimba dzema chiefs ndo kwaitwa inzi mapungu aya. And you know them. Pekuti kwaibikwa doro zingoto pouraiwa mumbe 3 poimbwa, because motivation, music and motivation zvaikurudzira vanhu. So they gave what you call moral support to the fighters. Moral support is like ndo yamunoti moralia. And even some trained soldiers, and they were also chief propagandists. Ndo vamwe vainyepera chi kana kuti varungu kuti hapana patina kumboita pungwe pana, because vaita make sure kuti kana vanga vakabatidza moto wematanda vakanzwa kuti mawhite's akuuya vaidzima moto uyapo sara pasina kana evidence, otoonekwa akagara pasi pemuti achitorohwa hake sipi chibuku chake akagara kumubvunza kuti ndina zvandikuziya. So they organized the warriors, they united the people, they led the soldiers, and they participated in the war too. So what were the roles played by the masses in the liberation struggles? The Mao Zedong concept, the soldiers are the fish and the masses are the water, which means what is more important here is the water. Yes, because the water gives life to the fish. So that's how the masses were also involved in the war. Of course, the soldiers can be on the battlefield. Yes, soldiers can be on the forefront of the battlefield, but they need support, maximum support. So just like the fish cannot survive without water, so soldiers cannot survive without the masses. The masses were very important because they were the information gatherers. They told the guerrillas of the direction taken by the soldiers. They even provided hiding places for the guerrillas. Because my whites aiuya and my whites manje ndaitaura labeling yavaiti tanzi tiri materrorist matororo hanzi magandanga hapana statement raitaura hanzi ipi lo gandanga, like vaifamba madzimba vachibvunza vana mama wedu kuti magandanga ari kupi. So the masses, the people, provided hiding places for the guerrillas. They even informed the guerrillas of sellouts. Yes. So they could tell the guerrillas kuti ningi kuti chimedza ndiye azodai, They cooked food for the guerrillas. Nobody remember song yekuzati gandanga ridye dirire. Vaitoziva kuti vainzi vana mukoma. Vainzi vakasvika pamba maitovaurayira mbudzi. Gandanga ridye dirire. Paiuraiwa mbudzi nenyama nechi kuti vadye. Vanakirwe vaende kunorwa hondo. So the masses acted as the recruitment basis for guerrillas. So vanhu vaitogara mudzimba dzevanhu. I still remember mama wangu wazvarwa 1962. And the period yavakadzidza I think kuma 70s vaitanzi every weekend pataienda kuzai zvekuti Friday mapedza wiki rechikoro moenda pa weekend, Monday muchidzoka maitona muklasi mashota one. People could go to war as young as like 13, 14 years, 15 years. Zvekuti first born imba mawa mwenzi sekurisa vainzi vakatomboda kuendawo here. Vakatomboenda here. Pavanenge vakadzokerera paboda. Because vanhu zvavaita because ndekwa ziniye Mozambique. So it's a walkable distance, distance yakuti maigona kukrossa border makutotakurwa makutoenda ikoko. So hanzi waito Monday yaya makuseni muchitosvika kuchikoro kuma7 potonzoti ningi uya takatoona Friday yaya manheru vakabva vatoenda nana ningi wotonzwa ku next class kuti ningi hazi ndo maendera aita vanhu kuhondo yaya vamwe vaitozoendera futi zveexcitement futi vamwe vaendera zvekutonakiwa vamwe zvemusikanzwa chaizvo So they also acted as luggage carriers, carrying ammunition, medicines and food for the guerrillas. And mamwe masses angasire kumusha futi. Because kataura to independence and before independence they built us as majarata zvedu kuno kumbare. Vakati buildira maflats nechichi. So pane vanhu vaitenga fodya neradio nechikafu nechichi vachiisisa mabhazi kuti zvinopa magandanga kuti. So roadblock aivako anga akaoma. which means nemabus driver mamwe mablack sika they did a good job yekuhaida zvimwe zvinhu zvaizonopiwa magandanga kumusha. So the Mjibas and Chimgido sang liberation struggle songs to motivate and entertain soldiers. So the Mjibas acted as spies for the guerrillas. The girls cooked food and delivered to the guerrillas in the bush. The African businessmen provided clothes, shoes, medicines, and transport to the guerrillas, because we also have the African businessmen. Pane vanhu vaitoona ma-businesses, vamwe vaiona ma-transport, kazhinji vainyanya zvemabhazi nezvemastoro, vaimati mastoro, zvemashop nechii zvemarokesheni, ndo vamwe vanhu vaifanda, you know. And some missionaries and settler farmers also supported the guerrillas by providing information, food, and medicine. Mamwe missionary futi aitengesa, mamwe ma-settler food, because ma-settler farmers vanhu vekuti they are engaged in economic activities. So hondo yaivakanganisira zvavaiita zvakaitika paanglo-ndebelewo zviya zvekuti ma-disturbances nema-raidings aiitwa nemandebele kuma-farms nema-mines kwaikanganisa ma-economic activities. So papanewo ma-settlers angakagadzira anonzi ma-compound system atinoti makomboni aya ekuti renge riri ziprazi but panenge paine tumatumba tovashandi. So hondo kana ichiitika vashandi vaya vanga vasingachashandi. So ma-settler iwo yakatanga kutosupporta the liberation struggle achisupporta ma-Africans, you know. And there is also the role of atinoti ma-frontline states, the communist states. Vana because vamwe edu ainonotrenderwa kunana Zambia, Mozambique, yes. Vamwe they went even as far as kunana Cuba, pane nyika dzaitisupporta, especially dzekunana Asia, kunana Korea, vana China. That's why China is Zimbabwe's always a friend. There is also, there is also vana Russia as well. There is also vana Russia. They provided like military support. Ndo vaitraina vanhu, vaisupplya zvombo, ndo vaipa futi chikafu, vane maroza vakaplaya vanhu ivavo. Ndizvo ma-frontline states. Kuona pakanzi frontline states ndo nyika dzaitibatsiridzawo muono. So there are heroes and heroines of the second Chimurenga. There are so many. James Chikerema, Edison Stolen, Tabanindi Stolen, from ZANU-PF, George Nyandoro, Joshua Nkomo, Joyce Njuru, Vivian Mwashita, Opam Chinguri, Margaret Dongo, Faye Chang, Leopold Takawira. Most of them were interred at the Heroes Eka in Warren Park. Jason Ziapapa Moyo, Herbert Chitepo, Robert Mugabe, Emerson Mnangagwa, Didmas Mtasa, Josiah Tungamira. So they are also like commanders of the army. Yes, Rex Nongo, Solomon Mjuru led the Zanla. There was Josiah Tongogara leading the Zanla again, because there was the Zanla and the Zebra Wings. These were the ones. They were the what? Because we already had the two political parties dominating. ZANU-PF, I'm sure it was formed in 1963. So they were supposed to. These were liberation parties. So you cannot liberate a country in a slogan. They needed the military wing. So you are na Zanla na Zipra ndo angari ma military wing, which means by administration the party leadership yaitoronga kuti alright, how can we execute the war so that we can give people the freedom. So in the list yema commanders arch of the army. Yes. So was parents Zanla, Mayor Rimbo Zanla, na Alfred Nikita Mangena, Zipra Dubiso Dabengwa, Lookout Masuku, I'm sure he's from Matebele and under Zipra. So what were the results of the second Chimurenga? So they surrendered. They succumbed to pressure. It means pressure. So when the whites began losing, they negotiated for peace. Yes. So talks for the peace were held between Ian Smith's government, ZANU-PF, ZAPU, and the UNAC. So representatives and were hosted by the British government at the Lancaster House, the Lancaster House Conference, 1979. So they talked about ceasefire. Ceasefire, it's like the war has to stop. So at the end of the day, they agreed that let us give the people what they want. Elections should be held. So elections were held in 1980, in which ZANU-PF and ZAPU participated. And the ZANU-PF won, should be 57 seats if I'm not mistaken, but they had the most dominant seats. So on March 4, 1980, the election results were announced, and they were as follows: ZANU-PF 57 seats, ZAPU 20 seats, UANC 30 seats. Then RF, there were 20 seats reserved for whites because we worked with the principle called the principle of reconciliation. I still remember when I was studying social studies chiri primary, taigara chibvunza question kuti ndezvipi zvakaitwa zvekuti takabva tatambira. So ZANU-PF won by 57 seats of the 18, which President Robert Mugabe was the first Prime Minister of Zimbabwe. So president was what? So it was a hybrid system with the Prime Minister and the President. So there was Robert Mugabe. President Mugabe was the Prime Minister. Then there was Kenan Banana as the President, you know. So the ultimate result is the blacks got back their land. And the blacks were now, there was now black majority rule. Yes, that's when we got our independence, 18 April 1980, you know. So that's it for the second Chimurenga. It's simple and straightforward. You can also beef it up by watching some documentaries and also reading the the what. You can also read the textbooks further. Yes. But next lesson we are moving to, I think you are coming tomorrow again, national heritage. We'll be looking into the national shrines, the monuments, and the World Heritage Site. Yes.